but we're going to be speaking about the Beatitudes, or working through the Beatitudes. So I invite you to turn in your Bible to Matthew chapter number 5. And I'm going to be reading through all of them today, and then we'll be focusing specifically on the first one. This is the Sermon on the Mount, which is probably it is the most complete sermon that we have of Christ when he was sharing and when he was speaking. That we have a little bit of the prelude before. We've got the majority of the text. We don't know for certain if it's every word that he spoke, but we have far more of this than we have of other different times when we see Christ speaking. So Matthew, beginning at verse number 1 in Matthew chapter number 5, it says, "Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and he taught them, saying, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.'" When we look in Matthew 5, we see Jesus' fame and his popularity is just beginning to become very pronounced. He's performed a couple miracles. He has a group of disciples. He is now maybe a localized celebrity. There are people that are coming from all over the area that are seeking to see him. They want to hear what he has to say. They want to get to know him. So Jesus, he sees all of these people that have come, that are following him, that have gathered around him. And so he goes and he finds a location, a mountain or a hill, in which he can go up and be elevated in order to speak and share the teachings that he has. And this is what we have that is called the Sermon on the Mount, the most complete message that we have from Christ's teachings. My father has actually very likely been to this spot. When my parents went over to Israel, they went to the location that they're fairly certain is the point where it was at. It's a rather high hill with a very bowl-shaped area going down. It would have been a perfect natural speaking point. It would have been a great spot for being able to share. And they even tested it out, that having somebody standing up on the top of that and then being quite a distance away, I'm not sure exactly how far, they were able to hear the other while they were sharing. Just made such a perfect location for sharing this truth. But when Christ is doing this, he's sharing the foundation principles of the gospel of Christ, his gospel that he was sharing. In the Old Testament, we have the law that was summarized with 10 commandments. And in this message, he summarizes it with 9 statements that we call the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes is a word that means blessing. And before we go in and examine the first Beatitude, I want to give you some general observations about these. There are 3 things. First, they all contain a blessing. As Beatitudes means blessing, some of the translations, they may use it a little different, as happy are the poor in spirit, or happy are those. But the challenge with that is that happiness typically depends on what's happening to you. External things that we can't control, their emotions, their feelings. But blessed is self-contained. It's completely encompassed. It is God's favor shown towards us. Doesn't matter our circumstances, doesn't matter what's happening in our life. It is going to be blessed because of God's favor. Max Lucado describes it as a sacred delight or a divine joy that comes from God. It's an internal aspect that has to do with our relationship with God. It's above our circumstances. It's above our emotions. It's something that has an enduring value. Not only do all of these have a blessing, they also all deal with our heart and our character. These are not things that are rules. These are not rules in the same sense that the Ten Commandments were thou shalt or thou shalt not. These are things that deal with our soul and our inward being, our relationship that we have with God and our relationship that we have with others. They're not simply just rules. It's the reality of God beginning to work on the inside of us, and then it begins to flow out. Not only do all of these contain a blessing and they deal with our heart and character, they also go against popular thinking. When we look at these, they seem to be the complete opposite of somebody that would say they were blessed. The world teaches the exact opposite. And I think that this is a great way to remember that God's ways are not the ways of the world. Many people would look at these and say, oh, blessed are those who hunger, those that are meek, those who mourn, those who are peacemakers. No, why would you want any of those things? Blessed are those that are happy, those that are strong, those that are full, those that are powerful, those that are in control. But God's ways are not the ways of the world. It is by God's grace that He enables us as He daily transforms our mind so that we might view things the way He does, that we might understand and appreciate them the way that God does. So with that foundation laid about the Beatitudes, let's look at the very first one. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, what does it mean to be poor in spirit? Well, first it means that we're spiritually bankrupt. This is not talking about money. I know that typically when we use the word bankrupt, we think of somebody that has more bills than they have money, and then they're out of money and they still have bills. But this is something that is relating to our soul. We are spiritually bankrupt. Spiritually and morally, we have nothing. When we look at somebody that's wealthy, or they may talk about them in a magazine, or they say they're one of the top 100 CEOs or the top 25 richest people in the world. The way it describes them is it says they have assets containing $25 billion or whatever it may be. What that means is that it's not just the money that they have in their pocket. It means the land they own, the businesses they own, the property, the cars, the electronics, all the different stuff that they own. For us, our moral assets, all of the moral assets that we have are zero. We have no goodness, we have no merit in and of ourselves. We can't purchase our soul's salvation. We can't buy the forgiveness we need. We cannot pay our sin debt. So, when it states here, blessed are the poor in spirit, it's a realization that somebody has to have that says, wow, I don't have what I need to be able to live the way that I ought to. So we have to realize that blessed are those that are spiritually bankrupt, because secondly, they do realize their need. Many times people don't realize our need. People talk about growing up poor and they don't know it. So what happens as humans when we're spiritually bankrupt and we don't realize it? There are many worthless things that we could trust in for salvation, and they're like counterfeit money. So let's give some examples that maybe help explain this, blessed are the poor in spirit. Let's look at Paul. We see from Paul that he had the right family. He talks about in Philippians 3 that he has the right family. He was a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin. Both of his parents were Israelites. He had the right education. He was a Pharisee. He was taught by Gamaliel, which was a very renowned rabbi. He had the right attitude. He was zealous. He was very passionate about doing what was right. In fact, to the point where here he's persecuting the early church. He even had the right reputation. He was blameless. But he was confident in his heritage, his knowledge, and his deeds. He thought that he was fine with God. He thought that he had all that he needed. It's like that when we may have some counterfeit money we think is good. You know, we think we come from a good family. Everyone thinks we're a good person. We have a good reputation. We're better than other people. We give to the church. We may give to social causes. And many think that they have a sure way to heaven. they think that they are rich in spirit. They're like the person with play money that thinks that they have it all. They take their Monopoly money and they get rolling and they say, look at all the dough I've got. There was a story of a gentleman that used to be the Southern Conference president. Before he was a Southern Conference president, he was also the mission secretary. His name is John Parker. And he had been on a missions trip to Africa as he was going to continue making connections and so on and so forth. And he was returning to America, and he had changed his money back into American bills so that he would be able to use it when he returned. And then all of a sudden, he started having some issues. He tried to spend some money, and they wouldn't take it. And then the next thing he knew, that he was there at I believe it was the airport or somewhere thereabout, that they had come and they came over to him and they questioned him, and he found out that the $100 bills that he had gotten changed were counterfeit. He was confident that he had the money. He knew he had the money. But what had happened is that while he thought he was wealthy, or he thought that he had the cash, that he didn't. He had been tricked, that what he had was counterfeit. And that is the explanation of what does it mean to be poor in spirit. It means we are blessed when we realize our heart's need. When we have God revealing to us and helping us to understand what it is that's important, we are blessed because we realize that God can meet our need. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. God can meet our need. And in order for that to happen, we have to see our spiritual poverty. Paul continues and he says that he saw his heart's need. While he had all of the different things lined up, he had all of the genealogical trail to back up that he was a good Jew. He had all of the education. He had all of the training. He had all of the knowledge. He became aware of his great shortcoming. The Bible says our righteousness is as filthy rags. That is speaking of someone that is not a Christian. What did Paul have to do? He had to give up all that he had gained by his effort. He had counted all things as loss. When we look at the life of Paul, he was someone in power and authority in the Jewish leaders at that time. He was someone that could go and he could make things happen. He was actively pursuing the early Christians as he thought of them as heretics, and he was actively doing the things that he thought was good. And he had power and control. He was able to throw people in jail and do all that he wanted to do. But in order to identify with Christ, he had to give it all up. He had to go from being rich in spirit to becoming poor in spirit. He had to count all things as loss, as trash, though it were. He gave it all up. He gave up his apparent righteousness. He gave up all of the works that he had done, trying to earn his salvation. And he relied simply on the faith in Christ, on faith in Christ. He trusted in Jesus, his righteousness, rather than Paul's own righteousness. And in order for us to receive this same blessing, to receive the kingdom of heaven, we must follow in the same path. Not trusting ourselves or our deeds for salvation, we must understand that it's not what we do, it's not the actions that we take that earn us a spot, that makes us deserve a spot in heaven, but rather it's giving up all that we counted as our righteousness and placing our full faith and trust in him alone. In my hand no gift I bring, the song says, simply to thy cross I cling. We continue to serve God in humility. We need to continue to declare our dependence in Christ. Being poor in spirit sounds like a silly thing. It sounds like something that you can only have happen at once. But the interesting thing about being poor in spirit is that you have a tendency to increase in spirit, and you have to continually empty yourself and remember that we are serving God. We're serving him in humility. We have to continue to declare our dependency on Christ. God has given us what we need, but we could not gain. We are not worthy, but he is gracious. He paid a debt he did not owe, and I owed a debt I could not pay. The foundation of all of the other graces is laid in humility, Matthew Henry writes. Those who would build high must first begin low. And we begin with this beatitude as the foundation for everything else that we're going to talk about. Because nothing else could ever come to pass if we are not forever leaning on Christ. But the good news is that as a result of leaning on Christ, we are promised to have a part in God's kingdom. As we look later in the book of Matthew, in Matthew chapter number 8, we see a story of a man that exemplified this very characteristic, this exact trait of being poor in spirit. Matthew 8, verses 5 through 10 tells a story of a centurion seeking Jesus on behalf of his sick servant. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly." Christ said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion replied, "Oh Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word and your servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it." And when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those that followed him, "Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown out into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you, as you have believed." This centurion had 100 soldiers under him. He made it clear and he said, "Lord, I'm not worthy that you should even come into my roof. But I understand what it's like to have men under me, and I know that if I give them an instruction, they can do it. Lord, I know that you, while I am so unworthy, I know that even now you can speak the word and it will happen." A perfect picture of the poor in spirit. Isaiah 55:15 says, "For thus says the high and lofty one that inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite ones." What is that statement? The Lord dwells high and lofty, high and holy, a high and holy place. But who is it that he dwells with there? He dwells with him that is of a lowly and a humble spirit. The centurion asked Jesus to say the word, and Christ has such faith, has marveled at such faith that this centurion has. And before he responds and heals his servant, he says there's going to be many who will enter the kingdom of heaven from all directions. They're going to go and they're going to sit down. They're going to be a part of the earthly kingdom, but they will be cast into darkness. Proud of their counterfeit money, they did not accept God's true riches of salvation. And then Jesus promised that the servant was healed. And the man's faith and humility obtained the answer. That answer included the promise of heaven. Humble we must be if to heaven we go. High is the roof there, but the gate is low. A little writing by Robert Herrick. The foundation of the rest of the Beatitudes is summed up with this core truth, that we have to admit that we are spiritually bankrupt, and that the only way that we have any good or anything at all is by God's grace that he shows to us through Christ. By confessing our need, God gives us his abundant grace. By continuing to trust him, we find his help day by day by day. And ultimately, we are promised to share in his kingdom. The kingdom that is eternal, everlasting. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Let us pray. O God, our Father,